Thank you all for coming. It's really special to come here. I accepted the invitation. Not so much I'm confident about my own work. I actually don't really do frontier work in AI, but I've been thinking about it. Then I accepted the invitation kind of on behalf of all the good vibes of Midwest, the memories of 18 years of trust and friendship. So happy to be here. I also want to start with a disclaimer that I will not be talking about specific products or architecture, more about how AI is changing the science that all of us do. The topic is quite vast, and yet I'll begin with epistemic trespassing. That's what we are doing. Some of you know that's how I like to start. Then also in the very beginning, just to make sure we are all on the same page, I want to mention this phenomenon that got thrusted in front of us in the 2020s and in the last 5 years also. These language machines have been called, they are quite a modern miracle because they were trained on large bodies of text by noticing statistical co-occurrence patterns between words without being taught to learn the meaning. So this is quite a unexpected spectacle when we, in your kitchen, when you turn on the faucet, the water comes out, there is no mystery because in the pipe it's water. On the other end, it's connected with a large body of water. But now, a large language model on your browser that's on tap, that's always ready, inside is a large matrix of numbers. So initially, some words get turned into numbers, and then when you open the tap, the human-like language flew out. And then they apparently passed the Turing test because, long time, both in natural science, in philosophy, people debate whether the meaning and human culture came out of the co-occurrence patterns or coming out of some essential connection between words and meaning. So LLMs really swung the pendulum. They made the essentialist camp's life really hard. The connectivist or the structuralist who believe the meaning came out of words, how they wrap a fabric of co-occurrence around themselves. That by itself is sufficient to generate language. So that is the moment we are living through. There is still the enduring question on whether language models produce meaning or produce cognition. So that we'll spend time examining that. I was helped in the last few months by reading this book from beginning to end, called Language Machines. It mentioned one thing I want to share. That is, historically, we'd like to know the knowledge was built on a ladder. On the bottom of the ladder are the essential words. So imagine the dictionary are written by setting aside, say, 100 or 500 primal or canonical words, just like axioms in math, upon which we build the rest of the knowledge. So that has been pondered on whether the reference can be built hierarchically from what's iconic, self-explanatory, to then we use those words to explain other words. Turns out it's not for lack of trying. No dictionary was ever written this way. Even the very empirical, very descriptive dictionaries always use some words to explain other words. There was no order of primacy. So this ladder is actually never grounded. Human knowledge seems to be built on a somewhat empty space. And then we also know kids learn language. No one, except a few odd or obsessive ones, they learn language by noticing co-occurrence patterns, but not by reading the actual meaning. So the arrival of large language models showed no empirical grounding is needed to produce language. That was the shock that came to us 4 or 5 years ago. Then in the past, this has happened, has been pondered. Wittgenstein would say the meaning of a word is its use in the language. There is no self-standing meaning. Then I immediately thought about another plot device in the science fiction movie. When you want to broadcast identity of a little target galaxy, but you know other civilizations don't have your language, you just need to broadcast a string of numbers, which are the distance of this guy to the 20 or 30 nearest galaxies. That information is sufficient to uniquely identify. Therefore, the entity, the nameable entity often is definable by its relationship to others, but no entity is self-evident. Just to recap, we just said, kids learn language by noticing co-occurrence patterns. So that is maybe one reason why we have this miracle from text to a gigantic co-occurrence matrix and some type of weights that encoded how to produce language as like a function. And then there has been ongoing debate on where to draw the line. Are the machines actually producing knowledge, producing cognition, or producing fairly fuzzy concept, intelligence? And also emotionally, many of us go from shock to grudging respect to even self-doubt. Perhaps talking humans are no more than cliche finishing machines. Perhaps all of us, you each have a carefully trained LLM between your two ears. Maybe when we grow older, we become more knowledgeable, more intelligent. Maybe we are just a larger, better trained, more context-specific large language model. Again, the line is blurred. So where to draw this line between human intelligence? There are many people who are obsessed with this line drawing effort. They treat themselves like border patrols. But the book I read said something that I kind of agree. If we are obsessed with drawing that line, we have been forced into this ever continuous cascade of retreating, and we are merely defending the ever-shrinking humanism. So is there a more productive approach, given the acknowledgement of this miracle, and then think about what it means to our civilization? As a language technology, I want to review some of the chief complaints or even indictments that have been hoisted onto large language models. Of course, there is a very practical line of critique about their negative impact on the energy cost on the environment, and then on the enhancing labor inequality, depending on how they are trained. But at the epistemological level, Chomsky actually said this phrase, saying they are merely lumbering statistical machines. Then they are fairly credible, well-reasoned critique, saying language models are repeating. They are stochastic parrots without knowing what they are saying. So at one point, I realized sometimes these critiques are self-contradicting. If you dismiss them as meaningless, then you shouldn't, in the next breath, complaining they are causing great harm. If they have the capacity to impact how society functions, maybe they are meaningful in some way. Maybe it's just the meaning you don't like. Then there is a notion of temperature on how creative they need to be. So in the machine, if we ask it to be faithful, factual, close to the training data, they are liable to be blamed for plagiarism. If you dial it to the other end, they're very creative, imaginative, triggering your thoughts, they are more liable to be indicted as a hallucination. If they tune it to stay in the safe middle, we complain about the slop. We are tough customers. We are getting something from the tab, but we didn't like what we received. Yeah. And then furthermore, there is a notion of bias, because the content often contains what are the society ills. If the human culture are innately bigoted, unequal, or racist, the machine, by doing its job, will create content sometimes in a dangerously large-scale way to amplify society ills. But here, again, there is a notion of, do you blame the tool or do you blame the executioners or the consumers of such tools? I think that would be a worthy question. And then, as to the question on how bad this is, or will that make us dumber. So let me read you something from way, way back. Socrates lived through a time when writing was invented. He was really worried. If he were here, he would be talking about guardrails and safety issues of writing. He didn't even write. So protege, Plato wrote to describe to us. So bear with me, let me read through them. If men learn this, it will implant forgetfulness in their souls. They will cease to exercise memory because they rely on that which is written, calling things to remembrance no longer from within themselves. Writing, it is no true wisdom that you offer your disciples, but only the semblance of wisdom. It's essentially saying, Socrates likes to say true intelligence happens in one-on-one real-time conversation. Two people, it's entirely in flux. Writing, what is this art thing? It's a record of the intellectual work that has happened. It's really the when you deploy that, you're telling your disciple many things without teaching them. You will make them seem to know much, while for the most part they know nothing. And as men filled not with wisdom, but with a conceit of wisdom, they will be a burden to their fellow. Furthermore, this is a strange thing or strange similarity of painting, which is a static, not a performing art. The painter's products stand before us as though they were alive, but if you question them, they maintain a most majestic silence. It is the same with written words. They seem to talk to you as though they were intelligent, but if you ask them anything about what they say, they go on telling you just the same thing forever. So that was the time. Of course, so many millennia have passed. Our civilization didn't collapse on this art technology. Rather, today's language model were trained by virtue of our habit to keep a written record. Turns out written record has been important for transmitting knowledge across generations. And then to the deepening and the solidification and enrichment of our civilization and its further into the future, still have no choice but to build upon the writing technology. Then there is a question, kind of a sharpened question these days, is beyond language, what else is in the human intelligence? More and more people are considering this notion on other definable elements or components of intelligence. If we, in a given hype cycle, here AI beats this or that other benchmark, there is always a question, what are these benchmarks not yet measuring? So I'm going to give you, in maybe next 5 minutes, in physics. I went to a physics conference 2 weeks ago. In social media, we all know today's LLM can earn gold medal 10 out of 10 times in Science Olympia, but they still don't do well in Physics Olympia. So this consortium of physicists with 50 people from 30 universities wrote 71 questions that are new and reasonably hard. They call themselves a critical point consortium. They spent 7 months QC these questions and make that a benchmark, and then start to test on the best models about last July, the 2025, July to September time. The challenges are at the level that's not super hard. They are like warm-up research exercises advisor give to junior graduate students. But when I read them, I only understood like 2 of them. So I have a sense it's harder than a graduate level, but still. They are leakage resistant. They are not published. They are open-ended answers. I'm going to give you one example. It's one of the questions I do understand. So it came out of a PDF. It's fairly dense. I'll parse it out for you. It said there is a population of cells. The cell size grows exponentially with a rate lambda. So it's a simple exponential growth. Then we add complexity. Each cell will randomly flip a lambda plus and lambda minus, fast and slow growth regime. But they stay in that state with k plus or k minus. So the half-life in the fast growth and slow growth is governed by this lambda or gamma function. Then the cells will divide when they reach VD. So there is a parameter. When this beta is 0, the VD is twice of their own birth size. So they'll remember how big they were when they were born. So they reach twice that, then they divide. If the K is the other one, either 0 or 1, the cell has no memory. It will divide when it's reached twice of the population average size. Then further, we add a Gaussian noise to VD. The noise can be big or small. The question is, can you find the overall growth rate of the entire population where every cell has its own life history? How is this growth rate, big lambda, is a function of all those that came before, lambda plus minus, K plus minus, and VD and K. And then it asks you to simplify to find special case laws. So that's one example of the question. So they gathered 71 and divided actually into internal checkpoints. There are 190 checkpoints to be scored. Sometimes when AI failed, they will shepherd the machine to that checkpoint saying, let's see how you do for the next journey. And then the questions are mostly theoretical, only require a little bit of computation or experimental. So when they send it to the subscription machines, they solve 0% of them. Then when they give it to GPT-5, it's about 5.0 last fall, have a 5.7% solve rate. When you add coding, doubles it. When you let it to search web endlessly, give a lot of tokens, let them say, search web as much as you want. 1/8 of the problem gets solved. So this is certainly not a gold medal level performance for physics problems. And then immediately they told, not in their preprint or their online winner's dashboard, but during the conference, the speaker said, we just switched to $200 per month model. By that alone, we solved 30%. So on one hand, you are alarmed by how bad it is. On the other hand, you're impressed by how quickly it can turn well. So this consortium is now courted by all the large companies. So let's do behind-the-scene work to see how we can train our model to be a good physicist. So I use this example to illustrate a question on people are still constantly inventing new benchmarks. They felt the current model used Math Olympia as benchmark did not measure the following. One is the ability to interpret physical biological meaning of those formulas and parameters, which I guided you through, but the machine needs to read and understand those. And we actually don't quite know whether they understand cell growth, divide, or memory. When I gave that PDF to ChatGPT, GPT did a good job of understanding what those parameters mean. Then you, human researcher, had to make a decision. In A greater than B or B greater than A, what would be simplified? Something even like fundamental laws of physics. And then there is a question, is that all there is in reductionist research? The decision to approximate had to be communicated. And then there is an even harder question. Would the scientist be willing to live with this discomfort in the in-between uncertainty? Because it's comfortable to simplify the equation to the left and to the right. But maybe biology and medicine happens in the very middle. You just have no escape from the dirty end of the pool. Yeah. And then what would they not measure? So I think about my own day-to-day work, which are the real-life data analysis in computational biology. Even those physics questions did not do the following. It's more or less about motivation. It's internal self-driven thinking, iterating again and again before coming to the weekly review meeting. To own the problem, try to make the claim rather than waiting for your advisor to make the claim. Then you prepare to defend it. You predict the next questions will come during the data review meeting. You identify dominant factors and make the attempt to simplify them. And then you need to think about what's my best next action to build diagnostics based on empirical data, which may be unique, singular to your data, either for its biological meaning or for its mathematical structure. You have to interpret and communicate uncertainty. So that has been the frontier difficulties in designing benchmarks that you can put out. So then if we reflect further, when I draw that list of wish list of the future benchmarks, what are we exactly doing when we try to resurvey the blind spots of existing benchmark? We are trying to redefine the elements of reasoning or intelligence. going from what has been available and what has not been expressed, or maybe it's very hard to express. We are deciding what is easy and what is hard, so that in our investment, we'll have a yardstick to say who solves the easy and who is still wrestling with the hard. We're parsing what is lacking in the workforce, whether today's human workforce or tomorrow's agentic workforce. We are also re-envisioning the education. What is the common core for data science? What is the way in a human-machine hybrid to further, I just invented the word, civilizational intelligence that's distributed across many people and many machines? So to do a quick recap, large language model is trained on whole civilization data for that given language. It has achieved this miraculous delivery, a human-level discourse and seem to have understood culture, that include history, sentiment, or irony. You give them jokes, they can parse it out very well. But most people agree they're not yet a reasoning machine, and then language is not yet cognition. So I'll reframe the question for the remainder of the talk is, what is AI doing to knowledge systems? How do they change research behavior, and how are they shifting skills market, the ordering of priorities and evaluations of different skill sets, and how are they changing the economy of science? So so that's very grand, but cutting closer to the university, we have been pondering this question. If frontier models are trained by trillion-dollar national or transnational entities on whole civilization data, what is the legitimate research lane for university-scale research? Because we cannot train the next large language model. Our resource cannot compete in frontier pre-training. Subscription usage, even if you do the $200 per month, it's still not research. You don't have the stability. You don't have the version control, parameter control. So maybe one solution is to install a local version so they can do repeated experiments on it. Many people are doing that, and such papers appear every week. And then a question, there is a working group in Oklahoma. We meet weekly. We try to think about the wedge topics that allow us to do local instances of large model for some mid-scale fine-tuning. So, and I do believe these questions are existential. They are mid-scale university feasible research agenda. How can we reclaim some agency in industrial scale AI? Just like the good old Midas days where we meet every week for Friday afternoon, we continued that nearly 100 weeks before COVID happened. So now we started Friday afternoon in Oklahoma City. One of the rallying cries for the group is, what are the ways to do meaningful mid-scale research? Can leverage local data and institutional context and our interdisciplinary expertise. We have a kind of a running list. This version has 5 of them. We try to rotate once a week. Then in week 6, we'll recap the next 5 weeks. We'll queue it up, find speakers. One is fine-tuning. Maybe EHRs, Google will give you the world's largest, but maybe citizens of Oklahoma have different genetic environment and administrative burden and so on and so forth. We want to do a little bit of adaptation, and if there is a resource, we'll do a little bit of retraining. And we have to know all of this can be costly. Another is more theoretical, have those with mathematical chops to come to our weekly meeting to discuss a well set up comparison, especially because if you go to large N, a transformer will win, but with your moderate N, where to draw that map, the phase line between the phase transition. For biologists, we do multimodal and cross-scale integration. Then there is a far horizon question on when will AI give you a study design to be the experiment prioritization engine. Then there is governance and infrastructure constraints. Even in the university, prototyping and deployment still can cause many wheels to turn, and then they run into each other. They became the sand in the wheel, and then we don't turn. Yeah. So I'll step back a little bit to say, in the scientific tradition, there was a wide observational and fairly naturalist empirical data gathering. But since Popper, science had a laser-like focus on A versus B hypothesis testing, in the notion that there is no other knowledge than specific knowledge. The general knowledge is as good as no knowledge. So that has been an extreme way of putting it. But after low-hanging fruits are picked, science has actually become very hard. We don't have worthy null hypothesis that is important and feasible. Often we get either important or feasible but not important. So effective design is hard to find, and we don't know what we don't know. So for example, these days, many of you, maybe some of you have tried to throw 3 or 30 papers, let LLM to do the summary. They produce a good, reasonable, and fluent summary. The question is, can they be pushed to find the friction point in that body of literature? Can they identify the fog at the very front edge of knowledge? That cannot be defogged until you bring the illumination of new data. And then that data may need to wait for the magical technology that may be very, very far. Just like we now genotype SNPs, a million of them very cheaply, but we don't record a million neurons with equal amount of resources. Then there is a question on how much you invest between imputable knowledge within the envelope of existing data. In my abstract is coded as what had been said about nature and how much we have to wait for that direct interrogation of the original witness. Getting closer to my own domain, we have been tracking the so-called foundation models for molecular biology and cell biology. When they are published, they say we have ingested all the today's best data. They are trained to mainly on the gene-gene co-activation patterns. In the past, we just record the gigantic covariance matrix. Now the transformers record in a more compressed way nonlinear dependency, both near and far. That seems to be the inner magic of it. And then we interrogate foundation models for these archetypes of tasks. Some of them are good enough. I feel the last one is still semi-fictional. That is to predict perturbation that you haven't seen before. It's a little, to a lot of extent, these are out of distribution predictions. One challenge is you don't have enough training data. The current covariants are often transfigured into an intracellular gene regulatory network, but that is a poor stand-in for the complex intercellular interaction. RNA data can often decouple with other layers of biology. And then on the time axis, the fast-scale primary effect gets muddled with a slow follow-on secondary effect. So there are a lot of echoes and reverberations in the causal chain. But if you only collect data in the first time point and the last time point, the signals are muddled. I don't have the exact quote for you, but recently there have been a privately funded virtual cell challenge with real data on perturbation, asking people to computationally predict. Eventually, winners were announced, but then the editorial is actually none of the winners. Yeah. Then another example is we'd love to believe when you study intracellular, then to cellular, then to cell community, these different scales of biology can transmit, but we rarely have scale bridging data set. Maybe I'll jump more quickly on today's coping mechanisms, but to end by saying few of these can be helped by interrogating language models. They really require expensive, slow, in the lab groundwork. The easiest part, you just type in this question, disrupt one gene in this setting, give me hypotheses, rank them, suggest how to test, 5 seconds, all of this. If you send it to a different engine, you give you something else, maybe 2 or 3 of the 5 will overlap. Issue is they don't really help us we take this burden home, right? After work, but machine will be sleeping. But we have to wonder how to choose all these options to go forward. Some days, after you finish writing R1, you send a question, you get impressed by, oh my God, these are so fluent, confident answers, almost like I don't need to do the 5-year proposed work. That's a depressing moment. Then later on, you realize this is indeed all very muddled. I actually need to figure out whether my 5-year R1 will build on the AI suggestion as a powerful starting pad, or I should reorientate my R1 to collect data to make models better. Yeah. So those are the decisions. So how am I doing with time? Sorry? 13. Perfect. Yeah. So I'll step back, just indulge myself, and hope you will enjoy. Regarding nature of knowledge, or what would it take to have the total knowledge of a system? So this is a quote I've shared multiple times. Laplace had this dream of a demon who knows everything. So again, I'll read it. An intellect which at a certain moment would know all forces that set nature in motion, and all positions of all items of which nature is composed. If this intellect were also vast enough to submit this data to analysis, basically the world's best computer, it would embrace in a single formula the movements of the greatest bodies of the universe and those of the tiniest atoms. For such an intellect, nothing would be uncertain, and the future, just like the past, would be present before its eyes. So I read it. Later I felt it said different things. Today I feel it's actually a fairly dumb, exhaustive vision. It wants no reduction, wants no experiment. Just wait for complete data and wait for God-like compute, and do it in a deterministic way, as if all the atoms are colliding as rigid bodies. Just mechanics can solve how brain work. So many centuries have passed. We have tried to, during this interminable waiting for complete data. One, of course, is the well-known way of doing science. Like laws of physics would be the poster child to try to drive at compact universal rules of interaction. And then we hoped they will become the bottom part of the ladder, will build natural sciences. It has been a beautiful dream. Perhaps chemistry is just applied physics. Perhaps cell biology is applied chemistry. We just need to know the bottom layer. We can climb up the ladder. But then science have other detours. I'll just give you one more example. There have been this just hard to give up dream in the world of genetics by not studying patterns of heredity in individual pedigrees, but just treat it as an epidemiological problem to do genotype to phenotype correlation directly. This, again, is on this vibe or this quest toward unified theories of life. Maybe the world is Newtonian. Maybe the p-values pointillistically, when you gather a few million of them, aggregate them, maybe you'll understand how life works. So that has been one ethos in large-scale genetics. But meanwhile, there is a second route that is more naturalistic, not A versus B, a comparison. Other people call that stamp collection, or just recording the travelogue, what you have seen. Occasionally, you find local laws, such as Mendel's law. Other times, you realize the mechanisms are very local, because in the past, energy and developmental constraints made kind of life's manifestation are often one of a kind. And then other than developmental constraints, there is evolutionary constraint. You get a species based on what's available by that time. So Darwin eventually landed on both sides. There are simple principles, but there are endless forms. on Earth. What is new? I find it surprising to think about the third one. Large language model, you can debate me whether it's fair to call it the third route to knowledge. It learns statistical correlation in massive data. Its reduction by those attention, still massive. It's not reduction by Laplacian's view of computing every data point, but computing an embedded, smaller version of that. And then, just like physicists wonder why math have such unreasonable effectiveness, like 4 formula you can put on your t-shirt explain the forces in the universe. In biology, when will we get our 4 formula explain how life works, how medicine can be practiced? But language model shocked us by its unreasonable effectiveness, capturing multi-scale dependencies. In the early days, there was a thought about neural network. The first paper called it nervous network because nervous system is what they meant. It's not anxious people forming network. Now we are at the time language and images can be kind of encoded and produced without transparent rule, without grounding to meaning. They don't yet reason well. For example, they don't predict across scales, partly due to lack of data. Then, so to take stock on what has happened in the last 5 years. On one hand, for all the human history and culture expressed in text and images, we had a capture in totality. We sometimes amplify what is innately or shockingly bigoted, racist, or unequal. But that's just what it is. Maybe a better attitude is to take this whole, all the clay on the table to do a forensic retrospective to understand human history and human culture better. Just like in psychology in the past, you analyze Twitter text and put people on 8 dimensions or 5 emotional axes. So that's a supervised assignment. Maybe with the text, we can remap the shape of human psyche. That manifold can have 5 arms or 10 arms. It's ontology building ab initio. So these are the happy thoughts. We are at the point, we can say unabashedly, all the text-based stuff that's been generated is in this machine, that all the science should be on how we poke this machine to understand ourselves. Likewise, for scientific knowledge, it's very easy to let a machine remember all the articles in JAMA and in New England. The trick is how to poke it to do differential diagnosis, to understand me or my clan or my neighborhood. So there is no shortage of broad views. Today, it's actually very hard for you to accidentally keep a narrow view. You just ask GPT, it will give you a survey. But the risk now is shifted to too many hypotheses to chase down. So if you speak in the Bayesian language, the priors have been expanded or flattened, but the hard work of using your judgment and using new experiment to constrain the posterior is still before us. And then mentally, we wonder, how much, which job will be taken, and will our kids become dumber? It's actually not we have a wholesale degradation of our intellect. It's really the shifting. We now just off-burden a lot of the writing, coding, and literature to the machine. And then we leave the other burden, which is to deal with the many hypotheses. The difficult bottlenecks remain. The problem selection, what is the actual pressure point in the past? How to define super sharp experiments that are feasible, that's timely. Just like you want to go in to interrogate a witness, what are the 5 questions to corner the witness? Don't go in and ask, scattershot questions. And then, even then, no matter how you do your enhanced interrogation of your witness, there will always be ambiguity. So the burden is on you. And to the discharge of that burden requires on your learning history and your scientific taste and your style. That is also hard to codify. then as an individual, as a group, there is always the harder question on when to commit. Today, when you call the customer service, why that triaging initial phone asking press 1, press 2 is so infuriatingly dumb? It's not because AI cannot understand, but the obligations behind insisting on very dumb set of choices. You enter it, you feel it's Kafkaesque. You say, oh, my problem is not handled by pressing 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is the difficulty of commitment. That's still not exercised in this customer service ecosystem. Then the labor and labor relationship, this is almost like Karl Marx's language on the difference between cost, price, and value. We now have a generation of content, but how to metabolize them? What is the indigestion of such a content? It's still a human-only problem. And then, for example, in the 50s, if you go to write a position in HR, they give you classification. The computers are the human, the women who do the actual calculation. There is another tier that do early form of QC, that do subsampling and verify. Then there is this programmers that are trained to turn computational analytical ideas into real code. Then there are engineers who design algorithms for that specific problem. Then on the top gear are the PIs who worry about the overall goal, the ordering of priority, how to allocate resource. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, calculator, we know which layer is automated. And then today with GenAI, additional layers are automatable. But still, we are experiencing not a degradation on how we deal with data, but it's a shifting on how we collectively live with data. So all of this technology as they advance, they disrupt our valuation of skills and the team structure. What can be done? I have a few. One is to reward frontier data collection, reward highly discriminative experiments, protect the friction, because a lot of integration models love to drive to consensus, hiding ambiguity. So that is another vigilance we have to have. Then in language, there was a hidden miracle. When you train better and better, you get the best, then you overfit, the performance will degrade. Somehow, at least for large language model, there is this second coming of improved performance. We don't fully know. We don't know it will work again for next data, whether your discipline's best data will be gifted with this second descent. And we also don't know where we are in this curve. Are we near GPT-2, ready to have that wonderful bend of the arc, or are we far, far behind? GPT-1, 0.1, or a million, millionth of one, Some of my ideas, maybe I'll share them with them later due to time, or maybe during Q&A, I'll bring them out. Let me go to my final message. That is, we do want to use this time, and I do thank you for your indulgence to go through this contemplation, whether the future years will be a stampede, an apocalypse, or it's just another morning. My own view is moderately optimistic. I feel most of us have 1 or 2 careers in a lifetime, have a dream of many more. But maybe now is the time. There is wonderful, radically expanded potential to reinvent yourself for additional careers. I'll share with you the poem from Pablo. Man wants to be a fish or a bird. The snake wants to have wings. The dog is a barefoot lion. The engineer wants to be a poet. The fly studies to become a swallow. The poet tries to imitate the fly. But the cat wants to be only a cat, and every cat is a cat. So it's his ode to cat. It's kind of thinking in this strange and disruptive time, we are forced to look outward, but also inward to know, if you are a cat, you will forever be, but you can be many things. This is So my parting word is to enjoy your moment in this AI age. Just like there is love in even the age of cholera, there should be plenty of love and grace and opportunity in the age of AI. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we've got a pigeonhole. Ben, did you want to put that up on the screen so that people can? We've got a system that you could go into a QR code and put the questions in, and I would like to do that. Hey, hi, Karen. Let me start with the first one here for a second, because I was surprised. You know, we found you to be a Platonist, but we found you to be a Platonist in quoting the Phaedrus.
Oh, yes.
You know, but Plato had a student, his name was Aristotle,
yes.
right? And he was really the guy who wrote the book, The Physics, you know, and he said, look at the real world to solve the physics problem. You know, Plato talked about the forms in the cave, in the Republic, but Aristotle looked at the world. I'd like you know, well, that was the world before maybe Niels Bohr, you know, in quantum mechanics. Something changed in the 20th century. How does that relate to generative AI?
So
had to give him a tough question to start.
No, in the past, empirical science is the constant with the world and try to create a reduced version. That's
here, Jude. Yeah, we move it up a little bit.
Yeah. So
thanks.
In the past, it's you know, we do research is trying to create this reduced version that's more rule-based, more understandable version of nature. But in biology and medicine, we have been confronted by the inscrutable complexity, and it's always a struggle to decide how much you reduce and how much you stay encyclopedic, how much you embrace complexity. I think the AI changed this quest a little bit by breaking some bottlenecks, always give you a total view of the past literature. So if you want to ask what has been said about this problem, it gives you an answer. That tool is magical. We shouldn't discount that. But the duty to understand which of those things are true, because the gigantic volume is not a faucet, it's a fire hose. How to still live an intellectual life and discover what's really new at the very front of knowledge is kind of the charge of our time.
Thank you, June. Karen, did you want to go ahead? Please log in and put some questions in there.
Sure, I would have logged on, but my phone died. So
by the way, go for it.
So thank you so much for the insightful things that you shared. What I'd love to do is understand a little bit more about how you think about AGI and true generative intelligence. If we think about what you laid out about Laplace and the deterministic nature of knowledge, do you think of AGI as solving the ultimate set of deterministic equations with perfect data so that everything other than corner solutions is solvable? Or is it that as we probe and approach an asymptote, there's some principle of generative knowledge that we don't yet understand, and so there's going to be yet another quantum leap in our ability, again, the unknown that you referred to? Could you share your thoughts on that, please?
Excellent.
During your talk,
your hands full on that one.
No, my thoughts shifted. I wish I had a notebook. Maybe one thing is to say, in physics, there is one classic multi-scale problem. On the smallest end, you have statistical mechanics of air molecules as rigid bodies colliding. Then in the next domain, the thermodynamics, where the concept of temperature and pressure as the emergent property from that molecular collision. But by the time we get to how air and gas behave, given the concept of pressure, dew point, and temperature, and phase transition, we do not have the need to revisit the microscopic laws of physics. And then if we go further, say from Oklahoma, you want to do weather forecasting, you speak the language of front inverted layer, lake effect snow, cyclone. You kind of graduated into another scale. You do ensemble simulation of mid-range weather forecasting without calculating the collision of every air molecules. You make do in this reductionist scheme to compute maybe a cubic mile of air or maybe a smaller scale. So technically one can always argue, should it be a square or a hexagon, whether the granular size should be better, and how to invest your measurement resources in time dense or spatially fine measurement.